So today I want to talk to you guys about the Overwatch Season 8 meta, and honestly it is pretty similar to the Season 7 meta. There haven't been way too many sweeping changes, but if there are any in the future, I will talk about them as soon as I can on my channel, so I guess hit that subscribe button or that notification button to see those. About the Season 8 meta though, we do see some changes in characters that are pretty good and pretty bad. Mainly we just see different characters being played a lot more, and today I want to talk about what are actually some of the best characters in the game right now in competitive. Now, this isn't going to be really talking about esports because Dive is honestly a lot better in esports, and a few other comps are a lot better in esports, but in competitive, their win rates go down a little bit. So please do keep that in mind. And these win rates and, just how good characters are is mainly reflecting Platinum Plus. So some characters might be a lot better in lower rank. Keep that in mind as well. But anyways, let me just talk about the meta here today and kind of just what seems to be going on for most of the characters. So first off, the best character in the game, statistically, as far as win rate go, is again Symmetra, and right underneath her, Torbjorn, which I kind of bundle into the same type of characters. The characters that you play with cheese comp. You play them on defense only, you play them just where they work on maps that they work. You usually try to get an Orisa, a Mercy, a Junkrat, some other spam, maybe a Reinhardt or something. You just try to set up and hold that first point for as long as you humanly possibly can. And a lot of the times, if the enemy team doesn't know exactly what to do, you can do really well with these characters. As well, they are very unpopular characters. Only about 1% of people playing them, so only really the best of the best will play these characters in the first place. They aren't characters that most people will just switch to at random. When you add those both together, it really just makes characters that do really well at what they do, and that's just how it's been every single season, and that's how it is again this season in Season 8. So if you want to try a cheese comp, and if you do just really bad on first point on offense, and you need a comp that might be able to pull you through, Symmetra or Torbjorn, those can be really good for that on defense. Next, as far as supports go, we're going to have Zenyatta. He's actually right now the best healing support in the game, win rate rise. He has a pretty good amount of players playing him as well, so that kind of backs it up that he isn't just like, those one-trick ponies raising his stats. He actually is a really good character right now. And I think it's because he can do a lot in a game. You can get a lot of frags out with him. You can just really get through a lot of shields like an Orisa shield or a Reinhardt shield. You can target certain characters with your Discord orb. And of course, his ultimate counters a lot of the enemy DPS ults that are really popular right now, like Genji, Soldier, Reaper, Pharah, all those types of ults. It doesn't counter Junkrat ult, but everything else than that, it's pretty good against a lot of the DPS. And especially since we see a lot of Mercy Moira, if you're running Mercy Zenyatta, well, Moira can't really counter a lot of the enemy DPS ults, but Zenyatta can, and that could win you a team fight in itself, and I think that's where he's really just doing really well right now. As well, I think he works well with a lot of flankers, and a lot of flanker characters are what a ton of players like to go on, so I think that's why he's just doing so well right now, and why he might be a good pick for you. He has a lot of good bonuses for himself. Orisa is the tank that actually is the best tank in the game right now, and I'm going to say, in my opinion, again, she is the best tank in the game right now. She can do pretty well against spam comp. She does really well with spam comp. She can just grab people together to make it just deal extra damage. Her shield's probably the best shield in the game right now. She's really hard to deal with. She does a lot of damage. She has long range so that she can be effective versus every single team comp in the entire game. There's just a ton that she can do, and she's even okay against dive comp because you can pull them away, you can shift on yourself to make so that's hard to kill you, and then you can start getting some ult charge on them as they're stuck for a second. Overall, I feel like she is a very good pick, and again, with a lot of further range characters actually right now being good, as far as in Overwatch competitive, I think she's probably one of the best tanks to pick up. The next best tank to pick up, which is actually a tank that's played a ton, is D.Va. She's around an 8% play rate and a really high win rate as well. I don't know exactly why everyone's playing D.Va, but she's definitely a tank that's doing well, that's played a lot, and it's very similar to Mercy, and that a lot of people really like. She just does a lot of damage, has a lot of potential on winning or losing the game, and if you can just cancel out a lot of spam, you could win the game by yourself, honestly, with D.Va. Or if you could get a pick in competitive, you could win the game by yourself with D.Va. I don't feel like she's way too team dependent compared to a lot of the other tanks, and she's very much a off tank right now because all of her damage that can do other things that can carry a game. So D.Va, I think, is more of a carry tank, while Orisa is definitely one of those anchor tanks, and they both work really well together. Even though D.Va can't defense matrix nearly as long, I don't think it's nearly as important anymore because there's a lot more spam that comes at the same time that she can suck up, and then she can dive the spam to make so it's not nearly as useful. So there you go with that. Mercy is not the best support in the game, but the second best healing support in the game, but the stats are kind of skewed because she does have a 14% play rate, which is just heads and beyond everybody else. The next highest is D.Va with 8, and she still has a 51% win rate. She's still probably in the game, in my opinion, the best support. You don't have to be way too good at her to be able to play her. You don't have to be way too mechanically skilled. But if you are, you're going to be a lot better than the other Mercies. You're going to get a lot more clutch reses out. You're going to get more healing out. And I think she's just one of those heroes that, as far as supports go, other than Zenyatta, I think she's the hero that can carry the most as a support player. If your Mercy is getting caught a lot less than the enemy Mercy, you might win that game in itself. Pretty much taking down a Mercy is worth getting 2 kills right now, because the res, especially on defense. And yeah, that's why it's so important to play Mercy well. As well, I think Mercy actually works really well with D.Va and Orisa because she can res, and they can put a shield down and protect her and make sure the res goes through, as well with Reinhardt. But those are the characters that I feel like work pretty well with Mercy as far as tanks go. Junkrat's the first DPS we actually see up here. Kind of weird that we have to go all the way down here for DPS, but that's because there's so many of them that they go all over the place. Junkrat can just work the best with spam comp, and spam comp, I'm going to say, in competitive is probably the best comp right now. Dive comp can work in competitive, but it's very hard to get off. You have to make sure that you have a D.Va and a Winston, and you have to have a lot of flankers, and you probably have to have a Lucio and something else, and they have to really play pretty well. But with spam comp, you don't have to play way too well. You can just throw out a ton of damage and get a lot of picks, and since Junkrat has one of the best ults in the game that has very little counters other than just trying to one-shot the tire by having very good aim, it overall adds to a very good position for him. As well, Reinhardt, D.Va, and Orisa all work really well with Junkrat, and while they do kind of counter him, they don't really fully counter him, and he actually gets through a lot of their shields, so even if Junkrat's against these characters, he can do okay, and especially if he's with these characters, he can be very safe, get out a ton of damage, and I think that's why he's so good right now. As well, his DPS is just one of the highest in the entire game, so that's maybe why so many people are picking him. Reinhardt's a little bit higher than I actually thought it would be. I know that there's a lot of players that just aren't simply wanting to play Reinhardt anymore, but he still actually played just a little bit less than D.Va, a decent amount less, but still a lot more than Orisa. Orisa's not very popular, but Reinhardt, he's still doing okay. And while I feel like Orisa in many cases does kind of beat out Reinhardt, unless you're in like King's Row or another very small map where Reinhardt is very successful, Reinhardt's just a fun character that has a good chance to make some good plays. You can get a very nice shift, and then you can just squash someone, and then you're up 1, and then you can probably win that fight. His Fire Strike can often get random picks and can as well charge you a lot of ultimate, and if you can get your ultimate out really, really early, that can win a team fight in itself. It can be kind of hard to use your ultimate against Orisa, but if you can happen to just walk through her shield and go for it, that can work for you. And I feel like Reinhardt, while he may not be the absolute best tank in the game right now, which he's been for a while in the past, like from season 1 to 4 or whatever, he still is a more viable pick than he's been for a long time, and he's definitely a pretty good character if you want to pick him up right now. Moira is a character that I've honestly probably overvalue a little bit in my opinion. I play her a lot, I enjoy her a lot, she can get out a lot of damage, she can get out a ton of healing. The only problem about her is that you already kind of have Mercy as the main healer, which is good, but Mercy's ult, it really isn't like a counter DPS ult, it really just like supports DPS and, you know, gets off a lot of healing and stuff. And Moira's ult is kind of similar. She goes for her ult, and it can deal a pretty good amount of DPS, some healing, but like a Genji ult will go through that healing, Pharah ult will go through that healing, and there's just a lot of stuff that her ultimate can't really counter. So I feel like if there was like a different main support, that could, you know, help out Moira and she could play as the off support, maybe that would work better, like a main support with a counter DPS ult. But that's not really how it is, and I think that's why she's just not doing the best, because oftentimes if you go Moira and Mercy, you're very vulnerable to dying. But if you can make it work, it does have very high DPS with that comp, very high healing with that comp. Dive comp can work pretty well, Death Ball comp can work pretty well, even against a spam comp, and she can spam quite a bit with her right click and her E, so there you go, that can all work really just quite well. But you do have to remember that it's going to be kind of hard for her against enemy DPS, and you just kind of hope that your team has some stuff to counteract that. Maybe a D.Va, which I guess is pretty popular, so there you go with that. Roadhog's a tank that I've been seeing a lot more, and a lot of players playing him, but he has fallen down a little bit. At the beginning of the season, we saw a ton of Roadhog actually, and his win rate was a lot higher, and even though he hasn't really gotten any worse or been nerfed anything, I think people are just kind of figuring out how to play against him quite a bit, and especially spam comp kind of hurts him. One thing that I feel like can be good for a Roadhog player though right now is that if you play Roadhog and Orisa with a Junkrat, you can spam out a truckload of damage, and it's going to be really hard for the enemies to deal with that, and I think that's a very good comp to go for. However, Roadhog with a lot of the other tanks, I feel like doesn't really work way too well, and again, I'd probably just pick him with Orisa because against the current meta, it's kind of hard for him to play with a Reinhardt because the shield just can't last too long, and I don't know, it's kind of hard for him. So if you can get an Orisa and Roadhog, I think that can work. And Roadhog can, as always, carry a game if you're really, really good as him. But for the average player, I think with Orisa is probably going to be your best bet. Lucio's doing a little bit better than I thought he would. He's actually only, number 14 on the best characters, but I thought for a long time that he just really wasn't doing that hot, but obviously he's still a playable character. He might not be as good as Zenyatta or Mercy or Moira, but he's still a character that you can go for, and I think if you have great shot calling, and that's really it. If you have great shot calling and pretty decent aim, and you can get picks by yourself, I think you can just go in, speed boost, and win the round for your team. Just because the variety of DPS, I think it depends mainly on your comp. If you have a Reaper or Genji or Tracer or something like that, I think it can work really well. But if you have something like a Soldier, McCree, Pharah, it probably won't work very well. Overall with Lucio, just look at your comp, and I feel like he does work really well with D.Va right now, so that's kind of nice, and with Reinhardt pretty well, but with Orisa, it's kind of awkward to play him because he really doesn't add anything to Orisa. So again, with Lucio, just look at your comp, and I feel like he is much more comp dependent than the other characters. Now we're on to a ton of the DPS. Here we go. First off, Pharah. Pharah, I think, is very good the lower elo you get. If you have a Pharah Mercy at very low elo, you're essentially invincible and you can climb up the elo super quickly. However, if you're at like GM or top 500, you don't see way too many Pharahs because at that point, there's a ton of competent DPS players that can just take her out of the sky. As far as this meta goes, I think she can do okay versus, Symmetra and Torb. But her against Orisa, she can't really take her out way too much. But Orisa can't really take Pharah out. And yeah, Pharah's just kind of been where she's always been. She's a pretty good pick if you can play her, but not really anything special in this meta. And we are seeing a few more hit scans coming up in this meta, but they aren't way too prevalent, so I wouldn't be way too afraid as a Pharah player. Soldier has actually fallen down quite a bit. He still is at the top of the DPS role, but as far as win rate goes, a lot of the other classes have actually gone up a ton, while DPS has been falling, which is kind of weird. I'm not sure exactly how that happens, but, whatever. It's probably, again, because there are so many stinking DPS players, and they switch all the time, so the win rates are all messed up. But Soldier still is a little bit worse than Pharah, I guess, and a little bit worse than Junkrat, but he's still a good pick. He's very consistent. You can play him as the support role still. He gets out a lot of damage. Only problem is I feel like that he doesn't really do way too well against spam comp on certain maps. For example, a Junkrat's on Hanamura on the second point, spamming around the right corner, Soldier can't really do way too much because he can't even see the enemy, while Junkrat can spam in a ton of damage. However, though, if the map's pretty open and if you can still see a ton, Soldier can just spam a ton behind an Orisa shield, spam a ton behind a Reinhardt shield, and just kind of do what he's always done. Or he can stay very close to his supports and make sure they're staying alive. Overall, he's still a pretty good pick, just not maybe quite as good as he was in the past. Genji's also gone down a little bit, but I feel like, again, it's just kind of weirdly how statistics go. Genji is still a pretty good pick, and I feel like in competitive, he as well always gets a little bit better, because if you can pop off as Genji, you can carry a game, and I think everybody knows that. Especially on offense, you just get quite a few picks, you get your ultimate, and you start swinging, and you do really, really well. As far as playing Genji on defense, I feel like he doesn't really fit with any of the tank comps right now. You can play counter dive with Genji, where you're a defensive dive comp, but if your comp doesn't really want to do that, if you don't have your ultimate really quickly from spamming out a ton, it's going to be kind of hard for you. And against a lot of the main tanks right now, it's kind of hard for Genji to do way too much on defense. So I would say he's a really good pick on offense. Even with a spam comp, you can actually spam quite a bit with your shurikens and then, of course, get a nice ultimate. But on defense, I think it's going to be a little bit harder for yourself. Reaper's a kind of weird character as well. He is the next one, and he's not the best character in the game right now because he counters a lot of the tanks that aren't that great. I think that he counters Zarya a lot, he counters Winston a lot, he counters Reinhardt a lot, and he counters Roadhog a lot. But against Orisa and D.Va, he kind of hurts quite a bit against. And Roadhog's kind of questionable depending on the map and depending on the situation and who's next to you and everything like that. I think Reaper can tear up medium to low elo really easily. If you're all the way up to even Diamond, I think Reaper can just walk in there, pop the enemy tanks, and win the game. But if you're versus a triple DPS, it can be really hard as Reaper to do anything, because if they're paying attention and they can find you, which we often see triple DPS in this meta, it's going to be difficult for yourself. I think Reaper is very good on defense because you can, again, hide next to walls, hide next to corners, you can hide next to the Orisa shield, next to the Reinhardt shield, and just blast the enemy shield before they can blast your shield. He can kind of beat out spam comp in that way. But there is the problem where, if you're on offense and the enemy team has a truckload of spam and the map is just a funnel type map, like the first point of, what's Zarya's map? I don't remember. Whatever that map is, sorry. Then you really can just do not quite as much, and you might have to switch for a little bit and then wait till the map opens up a little bit, like Volskaya, that's what I was trying to say. Still a decent pick right now, and especially at lower elo, I think he should be picked up if you want to, but has a few more counters than he used to have. Especially because, again, against Pharah, he also does pretty badly against. Winston's right here now. Winston's actually fallen quite a bit. For a long time, Winston was, like, the best tank in the game, It got nerfed quite a bit. The meta's changed. It's a lot more spammy of a meta. And I feel like while Winston, in general, is going to do a lot worse in games, he still can do okay if you can get a full dive comp. But if you can't get a full dive comp, it's going to be very hard for you. We see a lot of Winston mains still in really high elos. We see a lot of Winston mains still doing really, really well. And if you can get a lot of callouts as Winston, I feel like you still can carry a game almost single-handedly, kind of like Lucio, but it is going to be harder than it was in the past because there are a lot more counters, and just the way the team comps work doesn't really fit with Winston quite as well right now. Zarya is also kind of weird because I thought she would be super good against spam comp. You know, everybody's spamming out damage, you put your shields out, you get a ton of charge. But as far as, you know, win rate, she's the worst tank in the game. I've been trying to play her a lot, I've been climbing a lot with her, and I'm not sure exactly why. I guess it's because a lot of the other tanks can just kind of body block a ton of her damage, and she can't really add as much utility as other characters. I feel like in competitive though, if you get one nice Zarya ult off, you've kind of won the game, or at least won that point. So I don't know, she's just not really doing way too well right now. I guess it's because the DPS that are good versus her, but I don't know. We're gonna have to wait and see with that. Tell me in the comment section down below, why do you guys think Zarya is the worst tank in the game? Because I would really like to know. I've just been trying to think about it, and I can't really figure it out. McCree is a character that's always been pretty good, but not quite as good as Soldier, so we see that right here. He's just down a little bit from Soldier. Still a playable character, doesn't really work way too well against spam comp. In esports, McCree and Soldier are actually very, very good right now, but in competitive, they're not quite as good, but they're still good compared to a lot of the other DPS. He's a playable character that works pretty well with the Orisa shield, as a lot of other characters are. He can dive okay, not that great, but if you need to, you can dive him with in a pinch, because you just go for right click, E, shift, right click, and get that fan the hammer combo. But still, I feel like he isn't the best in the meta right now, but can do pretty well. Tracer's really weird because I always feel like Tracer is the best character in every meta if you're amazing as her. But in this meta, if you're not amazing as her, she's not way too great. You can get just one popped by so many characters, damage boosted Mercy, you're dead. Just by a lot of the meta characters like Pharah, like Junkrat, like a lot of the other picks like that. It can be really kind of hard for you, even Soldier, Genji, it can be kind of hard for you to just get around if you aren't that great as her. I feel like if you are super good at Tracer, she's just as good as she's always been. But if you aren't that great at Tracer, I probably wouldn't pick her right now because it's just a little bit harder than to spend the past to carry as her if you aren't that amazing as her. Bastion, he's a character where I'm going to say, play on Junker Town attack, try to get the pirate ship, and don't really play anywhere else because he hasn't had way too much success anywhere else. And that's all I'm going to say about Bastion. I guess you can play him against some other comps. He can work okay. If you're one-trick Bastion, he can do fine, but that's what I'm going to say about him. Widowmaker has actually been climbing a little bit, but her win rate's still pretty low. There's quite a few people playing this character. A lot of people are enjoying Widowmaker, but I think it kind of proves, because she has a very low win rate, 46%, and a pretty high play rate, 2.3%, compared to Doomfist, which is a 0.6 and a 45. You can kind of compare those. Widowmaker still is pretty hard to play, I'm going to say. That's how I'm going to put it. I think if you're a god as her, you can still do well in this meta. And if you're in a very open map that has a lot of places where you can snipe the enemy spam comp, you can do well in this meta with Widowmaker. But if you aren't a very good Widow, just play somebody that can spam a little bit and you'll be a lot more useful to your team, because as it is, yeah, she's not that amazing if you aren't that amazing as her. Doomfist is, yeah, not doing that well either. There's barely any players playing Doomfist. He's actually the least played character in the entire game right now. He has a very bad win rate. He can't really do way too much against Roadhog, against Reaper, against Tracer, against McCree. Oh, I guess Tracer's going to skill matchup. Pharah, he can't really do way too much against. Reinhardt, he can do okay. Orisa's really hard for him, and Diva's also really hard for him. Symmetra's kind of hard for him. A lot of the characters in the game, either he one-shots or he doesn't do way too much. And I feel like overall as Doomfist, he can be a okay pick if you are very, very good at him, but he's extremely hard to learn. It's going to take a lot of time compared to a lot of the other DPS. If you want to do it, you can pick him up, but he's going to be the hardest character, in my opinion, to just kind of learn at the very basic level. Amazing, another character kind of like that, where she's doing okay by a few pro players. A lot of the people at the bottom of this list are that way. They do okay by a few pro players, so you can pick them up if you put in a ton of time, but she's going to be hard. She doesn't really fit in way too well with much of the meta right now. She can work on defense, if you need to put up a wall on Hanzo or something, and she does have a good ult, but she doesn't just do quite enough damage in a lot of these comps, and overall a lot of people would rather have a Junkrat or a Soldier or something like that. Hanzo still has quite a bit of popularity actually compared to these other characters. but again, is not doing that well. He's just very inconsistent, very hard to play, and with so many shields being up right now and so many people being able to dive you, like D.Va and kind of Winston a little bit, mainly D.Va, it's hard for him to really just get out his damage. And as well, when you have Junkrat, who kind of does a similar-ish thing to Hanzo, and Widowmaker, who does a very similar thing to Hanzo, but just better, I'd say it's hard to argue to play him unless, again, you are one-trick playing this character. Ana is kind of disappointing because I love Ana. I think she's a good character, but statistically, she's the second worst character in the game. She's not doing way too hot. Her healing just isn't quite high enough compared to a lot of the other characters. Her utility, it's good on paper, but in this meta, it's just not doing way too much because there's too much stuff that can just block it and just counteract her. And not too many people are actually going for super big combo ultimates like they used to, so even, the sleep darts, not quite as useful as it used to be either. I feel like she is still a playable character in the highest elo if you are very, very, very good at her. But if you're just a player that wants to rank up, I wouldn't really suggest Ana because she doesn't really fit in with any of the team comps right now compared to just picking up Moira, Zen, or Mercy, or even Lucio. It's just kind of hard to argue for playing Ana. And finally, at the bottom of the food chain, we got Sombra. I'm sorry, I know that Sombra can do okay, and this is how I'm going to explain Sombra. She doesn't really fit into any of the team comps right now. She can work okay on 2 CP on attack, but on defense, it's kind of awkward. Can work though, but kind of awkward. She has a very good ultimate, but a lot of the enemy ultimates aren't the most important thing in the game right now, especially a lot of the tank ultimates. They aren't the reason why they're way too great, so canceling that out isn't always the most important. And I feel like she can't get enough healing out, she can't get enough damage out, and while she can work on certain maps that have a ton of health packs, on any other map it's hard to argue her over another DPS like Soldier or another support like Mercy, because the extra res or the chance to get a nice ultimate off of Sombra, even just having Mercy ultimate is almost always a better choice. So I think that's why there's so little Sombra mains and so little Sombra win rate right now. She's almost at 40% right now, which is not that great, and she only has a 0.7% play rate, which means that not very many people are playing her, but still, even with just barely anyone playing her, her win rate's still really bad, which just is a combination that you don't want to see way too much. Anyways, I guess you still can play her, it's just going to be a lot harder than playing a lot of the other characters, at least from statistic-wise. Anyways, as always, guys, that's all I'm going to say about all these characters. Sorry this video turned out so long. I really just did want to talk about every single character in the game, how they're kind of doing, if you should play them, their win rates, everything like that. And overall, a lot of the DPS are just kind of shoved a little bit below because they do just have more DPS, so their win rates are really always skewed. But even Junkrat, he's still about 50%, so, I mean, that's kind of cool for him, I guess. Anyways, as always, guys, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure you leave a like. Comment down below what you feel like should have been the best characters or the characters that you feel like are very strong in this meta and why, or if a lot of the characters that actually turned out being strong were the ones that you thought were strong in the first place. Anyways, as always, guys, thank you all for watching. Hit that subscribe button or that notification button if you want to see more of this stuff in the future, and especially if you want to see me talking about Season 8, and I will make it a lot shorter video. And as always, guys, have a wonderful day.